you are getting the information from in terms of reporting, in terms of doing other things that are relevant to be able to provide the correct information out to the public. So for today, we are going to have a look at data journalism. So basically, what we are trying to do is, with the advent of a lot of technology, you find that the ability of the journalist has increased dramatically, both in terms of the output of the work and in terms of the quality of the work that they can be able to produce. So, and you find that most of the work is based on numbers. So in terms of even the information that they are collecting, you find that the bulk of the information has really increased, but you find that there is a gap in terms of the skills, in terms of the expectations, because you find that the way the training is done in campuses and journalism schools is that they focus mainly on the traditional side of just the reporting part. But when journalists hear anything to do with data, they associate it with mathematics, then they start saying that it's complicated and stuff like that. So you find that it becomes a real challenge for many people. So the aim of this training is really to try to bridge the gap between the learning that you have gained in school in terms of where you trained as a journalist and the real world in terms of the technology, in terms of the content production, in terms of even the audience that you are targeting, because you find that in an age like this where it's a lot of IT stuff, the attention span of people has drastically reduced. So you find that it is very challenging for someone to be able to really go through a whole article of maybe 2 pages or 3 pages, or even a full page that has 500 words. But you find that journalism really gives you the skill and the knowledge to be able to bridge that gap and produce and use data to produce content that can really be able to attract immediately the attention of the target audience. Then it gives you the ability now, once you have their attention, they can be able now to process they can be able to now get the information in a way that they can be able to really consume it and use it for the target goal that you want to achieve. We're just going to go through the PowerPoint. But I hope you have the PowerPoint. Seems like it's not reflecting well. Do you have the PowerPoint?
No, can't you share from your side?
I'm trying to share and it's not. That's why I was actually having a challenge hearing you guys from in attendance.
Let me check. Can you see the slides now?
Yes, I can be able to see them.
Yeah, so you can proceed now.
Okay. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So the things that we are going to cover in this meeting include the following. The first one is introduction to data journalism. What is it? How are you bridging the gap between data and journalism? How can you be able to use data journalism skills in your day-to-day work? We are also going to look at fundamentals of open data collecting, gathering, cleaning, analysis, and visualization process. We are going to see how to incorporate data-driven approaches to fact-checking and reports on gender based issues, evaluating and interpreting data to uncover underlying gender-based violence issues. We're also going to look at examples of data stories on elections. Then we are going to have a conclusion once we reach to that. So we are just going to have four main categories, just the background introduction of what data journalism is, its pros, how you can be able to use it. Then we are going to look at how you can be able to incorporate data-driven approaches to fact-checking and to be able to provide data-driven approaches in terms of reporting on gender-based issues. So we are going to look at those two examples, gender-based issues and elections. We are also going to look at some examples, and then we are going to have a conclusion on that. So the first thing we are going to do is to be able to look at the definitions, some of the things that we want to go through, and so when you hear the word data journalism, you see that it's composed of two different terms: journalism in the traditional sense and data. So what we are going to do is we are going to look at a breakdown for each of them, and then we are going to look at how we can be able to match those two. So journalism essentially is the production and distribution of reports on current events based on facts and supported with proof or evidence. The word journalism applies to the occupation as well as, so the occupation like the roles, and also the issue of collaborative media who are involved in the gathering and publication of information based on the facts and the evidence that they have been able to collect. So journalism has those two kind of overlapping applications. The occupation, so like issues like doctors, just the way we say that being a doctor is an occupation or being a teacher is an occupation. So journalism is also an occupation that somebody can be able to involve themselves in. And then the other part is the media. So journalism in terms of the radio, in terms of print media, in terms of television or motion pictures, and those subcategories of the journalism profession. And then data is a set of values that can either be qualitative or quantitative about one or more objects or individuals. So really what we are doing is we are taking a particular object and then we are trying to highlight a set of values and a set of division of things that we need to be able to define, to use to really kind of profile that individual or that person. So data really just gives you the ability to be able to profile that person, to be able to have their uniqueness expressed. It can either be an individual, it can be a group, it can be a country, it can be anything. So that's why, for example, in terms of GDP, you have advanced economies, you have middle income economies and the rest. So you see that data gives us the ability to be able to really profile the different countries of the world into a specific kind of category for the specific purposes that we want to achieve. So data really just gives us the ability to be able to do the profiling and then give the uniqueness to that individual or entity that we are trying to analyze or trying to describe. So now when we merge both of them, data journalism becomes a flourishing field of journalism that actively looks for, searching, analyzes, and interprets various forms of data for storytelling. So what we are doing is we are trying to get the data from the sources. So the sources can be different. We are going to look at that. And then we are using that data, we are merging it together, we are cleaning it, we are interpreting it, and then we are using it to tell a story. So essentially, it's a pipeline of how an idea is researched, thought out, and presented as news. So it gives you the ability to be able to really have a funnel that gives you like the wide scope. And then as we come down, we narrow down up to the end where we can be able to get a data story being shown. At its core, the principle of data journalism and traditional journalism are the same. So what we mean by that is both involve asking questions, both involves trying to paint an accurate picture of the world, both inform passing information to the target audience, and both inform really the method of looking for the data and ensuring that we are presenting it in a way that is acceptable and in a way that we can be able to really highlight the differences that we are trying to identify from the group. Next. So what we have now is just no, Bida, don't go too fast. I want the previous one. The previous image. Okay, so now what we are trying to do is that picture gives us a really a kind of summary of what we are trying to do. What we are trying to do is we are trying to find a middle ground between data analysis and journalism, and then using that to tell untold stories. So data journalism is the intersection between journalism and data analysis only through the use of technology to be able to really understand the data that we are trying to explain to the audience. Next, Peter. So we are going to look at the fundamentals of open data. Fundamentals of open data. Peter, next. So before we go through the fundamentals of open data, what I just want us to understand is what is open data. So open data is that data that is readily available. So you find that there are different types of data. There is open data, and then there is classified data. So open data is that data that is readily available, either in archives or in the internet or in offices, maybe in print or in desktop applications, in Excel sheets. So open data is data that you can really be able to, anybody can be able to use it, to be able to analyze, they can be able to access it, they can be able to use it to produce whatever kind of story that they want to achieve. But then the other part of classified data is that a type of data that it can only be accessed by those people who have been given they've been granted special rights to be able to access that data. So that's the difference. So when we say open data, is that data that you can be able to use without any restrictions. So some of the key fundamentals of that is you need to define your goals. So by goals, I mean, what do you want to achieve with your project? What are you trying to solve? So are you trying to address a specific problem, or are you just interested in exploring the data? So because defining your goals will really give you the ability to be able to really know which kind of data to collect, how much data you need, what is the diversity of the data you need, what are the different kind of sources, where can you be able to get that data? The next fundamental aspect of open data is finding the right data sources. So many different open data sources are available. So it's important to find the ones that are relevant for your specific project. So things like search engines, government websites, data portals are some of the places that you can be able to find open data. So a very interesting project that is related to the same is something called Open Data Movement. So what it does is it's a commitment by some countries, especially the G8, previously G8, now G7, to be able to make available data from their archives that can be able to be accessed by different kinds of people and can be able to use the data for free. So things like housing data, things like data on health records in terms of like the prevalence of diseases, not specific patient records, but general content. So things like crime rates, things like government spending, and things like how they are allocating the resources that they are giving that they have from their own budgets. So once you have identified the right source of the data, now once you have collected your data, you need to be able to clean it, to remove errors. You need to be able to ensure that your data is consistent, because somebody said garbage in, garbage out. If you use incorrect data, for example, data that has a lot of inconsistencies, to be able to do like your data story, there will be holes in your story, holes in terms of even how the work is presented, or there's an inaccuracy of how the data has been shown. Or you might find that people can be able now to identify the errors in your data. So it's important for you to really develop the skills to be able to clean your data, even to be able to know that this data is strong. So we are going to look at that in the second lesson that we're going to have on Friday for data analysis. And then you need to analyze your data once it's clean. So this is a step that enables you to find patterns and trends using statistical analysis, machine learning, and other techniques to gain insights from your data. So you can do graphs, you can do different kinds of charts, you can do different kinds of illustrations to be able to analyze your data. You can also be able to use things like machine learning, things like online tools that can enable you to analyze your data in a way that will enable you to really drill down and get insights that otherwise you might not even perceive that they are available in that data. So once you have done that, the final step for that is to visualize your data. So this is now where that issue of the attention span comes in, because you find that this generation, most of the people have a very low attention span. So it's critically important because you might find that the impact that you create just by sharing your analyzed data is far much more minimum compared to impact that you can be able to have when you actually have visualizations of your own data. It's the exact same data, but how you visualize that data really, really matters for you to be able to have the right impact that you want to achieve. Next one. We done next slide. So you need to consider some things. So we are going to look at 4 things that you need to consider even as you work with open data. The first one is ethics. So it's essential to be ethical and respectful on the privacy of individuals, especially when you get some data sets that contain very sensitive information. It's very, very important for you to be able to really consider the issue of being respectful to people and ensuring that you don't reveal their privacy into the public eye, because you might find that there are many people who might use that data against that individual. So it's important to be very ethical in the way you use the open data. You should also be transparent by documenting your data collection methods, the cleaning, analysis, and visualization processes, so that others can be able to replicate your work. So by that, you are able to really show the correct steps that you have used to be able to arrive at the individual conclusion that you have been able to achieve. So you should also make sure that your results are reproducible so that others can verify if the finding that you made were not just your own assumptions, but they are as a result of a specific process that you followed to be able to arrive at that. Because the problem with having data work that cannot be verified is your biases are much more likely to be evident in terms of how you are distributing the data, in terms of the conclusions you're arriving at, in terms of the recommendations, because you might find that you want to prove a point. For example, if you have an issue maybe with a country or an individual, you can use your skills, not in a very nice way, but in a way that proves a point. But then you can, what will happen is that the conclusion that you will have your biases included in that. So it's extremely important to ensure that your work can be verified by others and they can be able to reproduce the results that you arrived at. And of course, the issue of accessibility, ensuring that your data and your visualizations are accessible to everyone, regardless of their technical skills. By that, I mean, sometimes it's not good like to have your data in zip files and stuff like that, things that can be very difficult to read, or JSON files that have to be decoded using things like Python for you to be able to unzip the file and do stuff like that. But it should be just something that can be accessible by every individual, things like infographics, things like maps, things like charts, that once somebody has maybe the link, they can be able to easily access the work that you have produced. Next one. So we are going to look at a chart that explains for us how the evolution and the process that journalism has taken as a field from the beginning up until what we have right now. So you find that here we have several different categories of journalism. So we have newspapers, we have the telephone, we have motion pictures, we have radio, we have TV, cable television, and then the internet. So it's just an infographic that gives us an explanation of how like the process, like the time in which those specific parts of journalism started. The newspaper you see is way back around 1830, 1840. Then the telephone is next after about almost 50 years. And then motion pictures, rapidly the rest came in. And then the internet came towards the 1980s. So you find that many of them are bunched there in the middle, but then the two extremes really have a bigger time span between them and the previous ones. Types of journalism. So types of journalism, we are going to look at several types. I know this might not be an exhaustive list, but we are going to just use this to be able to really explain some of the types of journalism that we have. The first one is investigative journalism. So investigative journalism entails the unveiling of matters that are concealed, either deliberately by someone in a position of power or by accident behind a lot of facts and circumstances, and the analysis and exposure of all relevant facts to the public. So digital journalism. So investigative journalism. So what it does is, what we are doing is we are unveiling matters that are not publicly available. So a classic example of that is the Panama Papers. So what it did is it involved the unveiling of that content that was deliberately masked by people in power to be able to hide their income, to be able to hide the places where they are taking their content, their resources, like maybe you find things like money laundering. So what investigative journalists were able to identify is the network through which they can be able to move the funds around the world, and then especially move them the tax havens. So that's an example of investigative journalism. And then we have data journalism or data-driven journalism. So I'm just going to skip that one for now because it's the main content of what we are going to look at. Opinion journalism reports on a topic using subjective ideas rather than objective facts. It reports stories from the reporter's own perspective, such as your thoughts and your biases. It's useful in helping people understand their own opinions and values, as well as to develop a full, more complete picture when consuming reports from multiple perspectives. So you find that at least in the Kenyan newspapers, I'm not sure about the South Sudanese newspapers, if they do that, you find that there's a section for opinions. So a journalist writes an opinion about a specific topic. Let's say the issue of the BRICS countries, the impact it will have in the world, the kind of all kind of information on that. So in terms of how it will improve the economies, how it will bring a balance in power in terms of how the power is distributed between countries in the world, and then they send it to the publisher, and then the publisher includes that either in the newspaper, or that individual can be able to share it on their own platforms to be able to express their opinion about a specific topic. And then broadcast journalism is just the normal reporting information to the public through media. So that can involve radio and television. So it has several segments, things like sports, weather, traffic, news, entertainment. So those are subsections of the broadcast type of journalism. We also have another one called digital or online journalism. So it's a contemporary form of journalism where digital content is distributed through the internet, as opposed to publishing through print or broadcast. So just things like if you have a Twitter account or an X account, you can be able to really be a kind of journalist without really necessarily associating yourself with a specific type of brand, but you can be able to. Things like Fabrizio Romano, for those who love football, that is at kind of online journalism, whereby he's able to report purely based on content that he gets from his own sources, as opposed to, let's say, for example, working for the BBC or working for any other entity or newspaper that is publishing things that regarding to sports. So those are some of the types of journalism. And then the last one, because I decided to make it the last one because this is the focus of where we are going to dwell most of our time now from now henceforth. Data journalism is a process based on analyzing and filtering large data sets for the purpose of creating or elevating a news story. So you can either use the data to be able to create a story from scratch or to be able to elevate. By elevating, I mean kind of boosting your credibility in terms of the content that you are reporting. So it reflects the increased role that numerical data is used in the production and distribution of information in this era of digital technology. It reflects the increasing interaction between content producers and other fields such as design, computer science, and statistics. So what it does is it gives a rise to the need for people to collaborate through many fields, across many fields, that then you can be able to really produce something that is very concise and very straightforward to the point. The next part. So I know on the issue of the types of journalism, yes, it's okay. Just go to that next slide. In terms of the types of journalism, there might be many others, but I think that really covers quite a lot of the types of journalism that we might have out there. So just to provide a context, I just want to stress the issue that journalism or reporting aspect of data journalism, even though in data journalism your interview subject is data, the exercise should not be just about analyzing of journalism data for the sake of it, but using it as a tool to get closer to the truth of what is going on in the world. It's the ability, so the ability to be able to analyze and interpret data as an essential part of today's toolkit, rather than a separate discipline, is all about good reporting and telling stories in the most appropriate way. So what we are doing is we are just using data to be able to tell a more fuller story, rather than as a kind of deviation from the primary roles of a journalist to be able to inform the public on the things that are going on, either contemporary or past or forecast in the future. So what we need to understand is that it's not really a deviation, but it's just kind of a toolkit, a tool that we are adding to our already stacked toolkit from the things that we have already learned. So it's important for us not to be able to deviate from our main roles as journalists, but to be able to really use the data to elevate a story, to be able to boost the productivity and the kind of impact that we aim our work to have. Ideally use the data to pinpoint things like outliers, areas of interest, or things that are striking, things that are surprising, things that are popping out. So it can act as a lead or a tip-off. While numbers can be interesting, just writing about the data is not enough. You still need to do the reporting to explain what it means. So what we are going to look at is we are going to look at examples, so that by saying, so that we can be able to really understand what we mean by using the data as a lead or a tip-off, just as a way to be able to boost our story, rather than just making it the center of the attention of the story that we want to have. Next. We done next slide. We done next slide. So now we are just, from now henceforth, we're just going to look at data journalism, because we are just setting the background of what we need, what the expectations that we might have in terms of how to be able to get the understanding of what we need by what we mean by data journalism. So here we're just giving a more broad explanation of definition. So data journalism or data-driven journalism is a process of journalism based on analyzing and filtering large data sets. Large data sets to be able to, for the purpose of creating or elevating a news story. It's a type of journalism reflecting the increased role of data in the increasing role that data is being used to produce and distribute information in this era. And then, of course, the issue of merging different kinds of fields. So it serves two separate but very important roles for news organizations. Finding unique stories, things that are different from just normal news that are out there, and executing the watchdog function. So the issue of the watchdog function comes in terms of how you can be able to use your skills to be able to do more investigation, to be able to have more context, to be able to have more kind of background and understanding of the kind of story that you want to share. Next slide. Next slide. So that is just a word cloud of what it is all about. So data journalism is about several things. It's about research, it's about investigation, it's about finding stories, it's about statistics, data intelligence, telling the stories, telling good stories, not just normal stories. It's about journalism in terms of showing the reality in numbers and then explaining the stories using data. So going to look at how it begins. So data journalism can be able to begin primarily through two ways, and these two ways might act as kind of inverse. So it can be as a question, then that question will lead to you to be able to gather the data and be able to use it in a way. So from question to data, so when a question has been identified, then the journalist goes out to seek the data in response to that particular question. So let's say a classic example, the issue of COVID-19. How are the vaccines distributed? That is the question we want to answer. So what we need to be able now to do is gather the data that supports our query, that answers the question that we want, that seeks to address the kind of needs that we want to achieve. So there we are going from the question to the data. And then the other method of how it begins is we are doing now the inverse. So we are going from the data to the question. So here what you might find is that in terms of exploring just the normal data that you have, let's say, for example, if your curiosity has led you to be able to, let's say, gain data sets from, let's say, different countries or the World Bank or wherever you are getting your data from. Then in the process of going through that data, you might be able to find some outliers, you might be able to find some of the things that, for example, might generate quite a lot of interest for you. And then that can now lead you to a question of asking, why is that pattern being identified? Why is that outlier there in terms of, let's say, income in countries? Why is one country having more income on average compared to others? Then now that can lead you to now gathering the data to be able to answer this question and then move on from there and publish your data story. So you're looking at the data journalism process. So the data journalism process has several components. So just going to look at each of them separately. So the first component is creating a visual outline or plan for the data-driven story you want to produce. So what we are doing is we are doing a storyboard. So what we're doing is we're doing a storyboard. So that's that involves creating a visual outline for the data-driven story you want to produce, highlighting key points, structure, visual elements, and then how you want your data to finally appear when you have collected it. So once you have done the outline, hello, can you guys hear me?
That is reflection from the background.
Yes. Okay, let's just continue. I'm trying to log in with my laptop. That's fine. So once you have identified the outline of your story, now we go to getting the data. So by that we mean acquiring or collecting the relevant data from various sources, or either from various sources or from a specific source, depending on the need of your data. And then this can include data obtained from web scraping, this can include data from web scraping, using your own skills to be able to conduct surveys. You can be able to get data from official data sets, from things like the Open Data Story and stuff like that. So once you have gotten your data, now we go to the next step of cleaning and analyzing. This is processing and organizing your data, identifying any errors, inconsistencies, conducting exploratory data analysis to extract meaningful insights and patterns, then doing the visualizations, and then writing your story. So the last part for that is presenting the data-driven narrative through visualizations, interactive tools, and engaging storytelling techniques in order to effectively communicate the story and its applications. Engaging story techniques in order to effectively communicate the story to the target audience that you are writing the story for. So those are the processes that we need to go through as you work on your data journalism story. So from conceptualizing your idea to getting the data and working on it in terms of cleaning, visualizing, writing the story, and then now communicating it to the target audience that you want to communicate to. So Bida, please enable me to share my screen so that I can share from my side.
You just share. There's no problem with that. Just share.
Okay. Seems like my laptop today is feeling terrible. Anyway, hey, just give me a minute. I'm trying to sort it out.
In the meantime, if you have any questions,
with that in the
you
meantime.
can ask. You can ask, or you can type your questions in the chat box.
Yes.
So if you can, like I said, you can type in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Be able to ask any questions that you have about the session so far. If anything is unclear, or if you missed out some point and you would want to have clarification, you can do that as we figure out how we can incorporate data journalism into fact-checking as well as reporting issues of gender-based violence, as well as discrimination, or looking at the aspect of gender equality. Do you have any questions? You can raise your hand, like I said, or you can type your questions in the chat box. Steve, I am not seeing the screen share that you are sharing. You guys don't have any questions? Okay. So what are the ethical considerations for the region when reporting on sensitive topics? So earlier on, you will recall that ethics were already mentioned. So when you are reporting, make sure that you are respectful of the privacy of individuals who are involved. You should be very, very transparent. You should make sure that your data collection is properly documented, as well as your cleaning, analysis, and visualization processes, so that others can easily follow the work and reach the same conclusions as you. And then you should make sure that your results can be reproduced and others can easily verify the findings, and then make sure that your data and visualizations are accessible to everyone, regardless of their technical skills. So these are very important considerations that you should make sure that you figure out. Yes, Steve, we can now see your screen, and you have a question in the chat box. Somebody is asking, how can data journalists ensure their stories are accessible and understandable to a wide range of audience? You have a question there, you can answer that, and proceed with your presentation thereafter. Meanwhile, if you have any other question, you can drop in the chat box. Yes, Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, you can answer the question and proceed.
Okay. So for in terms of ensuring that your data is accessible and understandable to a wide range of audiences, in terms of understandability, ensure that things like clarity, in terms of, we are going to also look at some of the things you can be able to do, but ensure that your story is straight to the point. Ensure that there is not a lot of clutter in terms of between the beginning of your story and the point that you are trying to make. So by that, I mean that when you are writing another story, just ensure that you only highlight the things that will contribute to the overall understanding of your story. Because you might find that sometimes people can really just bog down people with a lot of information. Then at the end, they come up with a different thing. So just ensure that you're going straight to the point. You're using the relevant type mixture in terms of the colors, in terms of how the content is being produced, in terms of ensuring that your presentation can be able to catch the attention of people by ensuring that it's very easy to understand, but also communicates the information in terms of being exhaustive. So don't pass information in bits. Make sure that when you're passing the information is clear. You are also seeing that you can be able to really understand. You can be able to really pass information that is easy to understand, but also straight to the point, and achieving the target that you are trying to communicate, or the point that you're trying to communicate. So accessibility, that ensure that your content is shared in platforms, for example, that are easily accessible by many people. It's not in complicated forms, so it's not like zip files and stuff like that, or complicated things that might be challenging for people to be able to access. So just make sure that you share something that communicates the message that you want to communicate, but also in a very accessible way. Some of the challenges reporting on data-driven stories in a rapidly changing digital landscape. The answer for that, I will answer that, and then Bida will also assist me in answering that. One of the ways to be able to ensure, like, some of the challenges that you might have is the skills gap in terms of even the reporters and also the audience, accessibility of the information by the people you're trying to communicate to, infrastructure challenges, things like internet, in terms of cost, in terms of availability of that internet, in terms of the speed, because you might find that some internet sometimes in some places maybe there is an issue, maybe the government has shut down internet and stuff like that. So that can really be a challenge in terms of reporting on the stories in this digital landscape. Bida, maybe you can add something on how can data journalists ensure, not that one, the one on the challenges. You can add something on that if you have something to add.
Not really. I think you have answered satisfactorily. There's one question in the chat box. Somebody is asking, in data journalism, are open and classical data similar to secondary and primary data and research?
I'm trying to get the question clearly from the chat box. So open and classical data. So open data really is just they're not very similar, but the issue now is because when you look at primary and secondary data, so primary data is that data that is easily accessible, that you can be able to obtain it firsthand. But then secondary data is that data that maybe you can be able to calculate from the data that you have already gotten, or getting it from other sources in terms of like using the data that other people have researched on, then using that data for you to be able to do your research. But then open data can be able to encompass both of them in terms of the issue, because you find that the open data that we are talking about here is research that has been done by other people, and then they are making that data available to the public. So that's what we mean by open data. Then classical data, I'm not sure about that, to be honest, but I'll make sure that we find out that when we come next. Have I answered all the questions? I hope I have answered all the questions. Yes?
Yes, you answered the question. Yes, it is clear.
Okay.
I understand.
So we're going to look at some types of data journalism, and I want us to move a bit faster because of time. So some of the types of data journalism stories. The first one is a novelty. These are data sets that have never been seen before. The classic example that comes to my mind is the Pandora Papers, because that is data that had never been seen before in the public eye. So what the people who are doing the research were doing is they were just using simple summaries just to explain, instead of just posting out all the information that they were able to access. What they did is they were using a simple summaries to be able to make it understandable for the general public. So novelty is those things, just like what they were talking about COVID-19, novel virus, things that have never been seen before. The second one is an outlier. So it's something different from all other members of a particular group. So what you can do with that is use characterization to be able to explain the difference between the outlier and the general members of that particular group. So an example of an outlier is something that you might not expect. So let's say when Leicester City won the Premier League in 2016, what happened is it really created a lot of fires because it's something that was not really expected, considering the size of the club, considering the type of players that they had, considering the level that they were the previous seasons before. So that really created a kind of outlier that can be able, that was able to isolate itself from its general characterization. Then the next one is an archetype. So it's a typical example. So it's like the opposite of outlier, a typical example of a certain person or thing. So the easiest way is to use modeling. So like just do the model of how a typical individual or a particular person or entity looks like, then you can be able to have the archetype type of data story. So trends, time series are changing over time. So the risk with that is you can really make overarching conclusions. So really it's important to refrain when you are working with trends so that you do not make that extrapolating conclusions that might backfire in the future. The debunking, so things like using data to disapprove a common misconception. I don't think I need to explain this a lot because we have done issue of debunking and issue of fact checking. That is, those two things are very similar, debunking and fact checking. Then the last one is forecasting or estimation of future events. So that might also be slightly about trends, but trends cover all the three dimensions, the past, present, and future. But forecasting, we're just using the data that we already have to be able to make a prediction about the future. So the danger with that is you might be very tempted to be very kind of technical in terms of how you're doing the forecasting and making sure that the forecast fits into the identity that you want to see in the future. So it's really important to be careful also in the issue of forecasting. That's why you don't hear, let's say, the World Bank saying that the economy of Kenya will grow by 50%. They do not want a very, very, very outlandish forecast. They just want to, based on the data that they have collected, historical data, the current situation of the country, they can be able to really just do a very, very minimum percentage of forecast or predictions about the future. And that's why you might find even, let's say if they do adjustments, they don't adjust by, let's say, 5 percentage points. They adjust with 0.5%, 0.14%, something very small, because they do not want to make the estimations to be very fitting. So just, we're now starting to look at examples. And the first example that I want us to look at is a very, very old example. Before Berlin Conference, very many years before Berlin Conference, for those of us who are in history, who are history students, for 1884, a cholera outbreak that happened in London in 1854. So what one medical doctor did is that once there was that outbreak, he just took the number of cases and then he kind of mirrored it onto the streets of the city. So during that time, people in London were using tap water. They were not using the house water that people open on their sinks and stuff like that. So what used to happen is there were taps for this particular number of households, and then the next street has its own tap and stuff like that. That's why you see taps being distributed along the various points. And then you find that there's a concentration of cases around a specific particular, a specific tap. Because you see these taps that are on the peripheries, the cases are very, very minimal. Some do not even have cases at all. But then you find that one particular tap has a very, very high number of cholera cases. So the dots, the sizes of the dots represent the number of cases. So you see that the closer a household was to that tap, the more higher number of cases that they have. So this is an example of using data journalism. So like what he did is to be able to, he's not a journalist, but he was a medical doctor, but he used that to really do data journalism in terms of visualizing the information in a way that is very easy to understand. So you see now what he could have done is written a page, an essay or an article on that. But what he did is he just made an infographic that had the streets and then overlaid on top of that the number of cases. And that is when they were able to discover at that time that cholera is transmitted through water. So what happened is once they stopped that tap running, because apparently it had been infected by diapers that were thrown from a toddler into that place where the water was being stored before it came to the tap. So what happened is once consumption of that water from that specific tap was stopped, the cholera outbreak was able to be dealt with. So that's a very classic example of how you can be able to use data journalism to be able to really make a point and be able to back up your case. So now we are going to look at the importance. We're going to look at several things on the importance of data journalism. The first one is you can use it to tell stories that are far much richer as compared to just reporting on that. We are going to look at example of how you can be able to really tell a very rich story just by using data journalism. So journalists can be able to analyze the dynamics of a complex situation, such as a political debate, riots, and then things like that, and then help everyone to see possible solutions to those complex problems. And the next importance is using data means less guessing and more facts. So journalists don't have to rely on course of sources who tend to deny everything when they come under pressure. And we are very familiar with that in our media landscape. So furthermore, they can reveal how abstracts such as unemployment affects people based on age, gender, and education, and etc. etc. So what they can be able to do is, instead of just guessing things, they can be able to really use data to be able to make a more concrete data story that they can be able to share with the public. Then, of course, it improves the efficiency of the reporting. Reporters frequently collect information from some sources over and over again. So things like census surveys, police and health reports. So obtaining and organizing this information can be made infinitely more efficient, even totally automatic by keying into the data behind the reports. So things like crime rates, things like health reports, they can really be automated in terms of how they are organized, in terms of how they are collected. So that when you have new information, you don't have to do the same process over again. Just feed the information into the system, and then it's able to classify itself like that. And then it can provide deeper insights into information that will be difficult to find or prove. So it locates outliers and identify trends that are not just statistically significant, but relevant to decompiling the inherently complex world of today. So what data gives you the ability is to really reduce the complexity of that particular story to a level that is easy to understand, so that you can be able to analyze and see how you can be able to make a change. So things like climate change, how it can be able to, how it's a very complex thing, but how you can be able to really break it down in terms of using data to be able to highlight, like how the issue of high temperatures, the issue of low rainfall, the issue of desertification, the issue of this country was able to plant these trees, things like that. You can really be able to use data to be able to point out outliers, areas of interest, or things that are a bit surprising, because you might find that some countries are mitigating it in a much more easier way than others, so that you can be able to really use it to understand it in a much more easier way. Then the last one is the journalists can use data to transform something abstract into something that's easily understood by everyone. Creating personalized calculators to help people make informed decisions, such as purchasing a car, house, or deciding on an educational professional path. So what they can be able to do is they can be able to have a breakdown of, let's say, issues of professional path, income levels by country, by state, by years of experience. They can be able to really break that down, so that when somebody is trying to make a decision, they are infinitely much more informed compared to if they just read random numbers and read publications in normal journalism stories. So before we go to the next slide, I don't know if people have questions. If people have questions, maybe you can put in the chat box like the ones we already answered, and we are going to address them as we go along. So I'm just going to move a bit faster because of time. We are going to look at emerging trends. So you find that some trends are really quite advancing and increasing in pace. So we're just going to look at that. So some of the really emerging trends is the use of advanced tools to map a data set based on regions and countries. So you find that now you don't have to use, let's say, if you're passing information about a country or countries, if you're doing a data story, you can be able to do visualizations using maps and specific locations, images and videos. So things like social media platforms really have taken this to another level. Images on things like data banks, things like blogs and websites, they are really becoming a trend. So you find that it is very difficult for you now to read just a story continuously. Let's say it's a blog or it's a Twitter post, and you find that it does not have a picture. In fact, there's a research that has been done that a tweet that has a picture is much more effective in terms of the reach, in terms of the reactions, in terms of how people are consuming the content easily, as compared to just using words to be able to explain your point. So that just shows you the importance of things like that. And then something called disaggregating averages, which refers to information that has been collected from multiple sources or multiple measures, variables, or individuals, combined into summaries of data, and then broken down into component parts or smaller units of data. Data is disaggregated for the purpose of revealing underlying trends, patterns, or insights that will not be observable in aggregated data. So let's say, for example, classic example of what we of this disaggregating averages. The issue of the results, the S4 results. I don't know if you guys saw the data story that we published a while ago on 2-on-1 check on our data stories platform. So what we did is we took data from the whole country, then we break it down into different states, we break it down into different schools, we break it down into different gender. So what you find that a constant, even though, for example, let's say some overall the country might have not done very well in exams, but you find that there's some outliers of places that have done extremely well, that have students who are performing very well, while others do not have as many representatives in the performance skills as those ones. So the purpose of disaggregating averages is we can be able to see underlying trends and patterns. For example, you find that, let's say, states that were not very close to Juba did not do as much more well than as compared to those that were closer to Juba. And even here in Kenya, we find the same trend. Let's say schools that are based in outflung areas like Turkana or Garissa or Mandera, they do infinitely much more worse compared to schools in Nairobi, schools in much more wealthier places and stuff like that. And now you might be able to get insights on that. So you might find that infrastructure is a problem. They say access to the schools. Students might have to walk a long distance. There's an issue of security. There's issue of lack of study materials and stuff like that. So if we had just presented that data and say that this year the performance of S4 was much better compared to last year, end of story, you see that we are missing a lot of information as compared to if we had actually just broken down those data sets. And then the issue of trends, social media, influencers, public opinion shifting. So many organizations these days are using social media to influence public opinion. So you find the issue of, let's say, an example of X platform, and then Threads, and then the upcoming fights between Mark and Zach. So stuff like that create trends. Then you find that some people are influencers and they are able to really deviate public opinion from one particular standpoint to another different standpoint. So those are just some of the trends that we can really be able to use to our own advantage as journalists to be able to really improve the way we communicate, the way we tell our stories, the way we can be able to really just improve the skills that we already have so that we can be able to use it to make much more impact in our target audiences. And those are just some of the links. No, my time is quite gone, so I'll just try to move a bit faster. So the next thing we are going to do is incorporating data-driven approaches to fact check and report on gender issues. So how can you be able to incorporate data-driven approaches? So approaches that really enable you to focus on data to be able to, as you do your fact checking and report on gender-based issues. The first one is always ensure that you're collecting and analyzing reliable data. So start by gathering relevant and credible data related to gender-based issues being investigated. So if you're investigating something like gender-based violence, ensure that you are able to collect the relevant data. So use government reports, surveys that have been published, academic studies, data collected by reputable organizations like World Bank. World Bank has a very good database on gender-based issues. So it can be really a good and relevant source of data for you to use. I use data visualization techniques. So utilizing data visualization techniques, once you have collected your data, to do the presentation of the information in a clear and understandable format. So things like infographics, charts, and graphs can help readers to comprehend complex information easily, making the data more accessible and engaging for the target audience. They seek expert analysis. So collaborate with experts in gender studies, social studies, data analysis, to interpret the data and provide insights. These experts can help journalists identify patterns or trends, clarify technical terminology, ensure accurate reporting, and things like that. So the reason we are saying that it's important to seek expert analysis is there are some things that a layman cannot see unless if you are a subject matter expert. So if you are an expert on that field, you can be able to easily identify things that might not be visible to a common, in Kenya, what we call to a common man. Some are like a layman, so to speak. And then fact check claims and statistics. So examine statistics, figures, and claims related to gender-based issues through fact checking frameworks. Investigate the sources, the methodologies used to cite the data, then the articles and the reports that have been passing out that information. So those are some of the ways you can be able to really incorporate data-driven approaches in as we report on things like fact checking and gender-based issues. The next one is overview of data-driven approaches to fact check and report on gender-based issues. So I'm just going to go through them a bit faster so that we can be able to look at 2 examples. Provide context and comparisons. So frame your data within a broader context to help readers understand the significance of the findings. Compare data through regions, across regions, periods, and demographic groups to identify disparities and changes over time. Provide historical context. It can be, as this can help you to reveal long-term patterns and enable readers to draw accurate conclusions. Incorporate personal stories, since human stories can provide a deep understanding as compared to just random data. So human stories can provide a deeper understanding of the impact of gender-based issues. Combine individual narratives with data-backed evidence to create a more well-rounded and empathic coverage. Engage with the community. So share your data findings with affected communities, activists in that field, organizations working on gender-based issues. Seeking their perspectives and including their voices in the reporting can ensure more comprehensive and inclusive understanding of the topic. So you find that once you can be able to include other people, it's much easier for your report to have much more impact as compared to if it's just produced by one individual. Collaborate with data journalists. Join forces with data journalists who possess the knowledge and skills to analyze and visualize data effectively. Collaborations can enhance the quality, impact, and reach of your reporting and foster innovation in storytelling. So those are some of the approaches you can be able to use. So include personal stories, provide context and comparisons, engage with the people involved in that field, then collaborate with our journalists to be able to understand your data much better. So evaluating and interpreting data to uncover underlying gender-based issues and patterns. Consider the context. It's essential to consider the context in what the data is collected. So things like political, social, and economic environment. So data collected in a country with a high rate of gender-based violence may differ from those collected in a country with low rate of violence. So also always consider the context. Be aware of the limitations, since no data is perfect. There may be things like missing data, inaccuracies, biasness in the data. So it's essential to be aware of the limitations of your data so that you can interpret it correctly. Use multiple data sources to get a complete picture of the issue, as this is often helpful. It can help verify the findings and to identify patterns that may not be evident in a single data set. Involve experts. That's as we said, if you are familiar with gender-based violence and discrimination, involving experts in the field is important, as they can help you to interpret the data, identify underlying patterns. Then always be transparent about your data collection, cleaning and analysis, and interpretation processes. as this will help you to ensure that your findings are credible, that others can replicate your work. Okay, so now we are going to look at a few examples. So we're going to look at an example of data story on election, then a data story on gender-based issues. Then we are going to wrap it up. So I'm just going to use an example of Nigerian elections done by two media organizations, one in Nigeria and another Al Jazeera. So just what I want us to do is see how I can be able to note the differences. I'm just going to just go to those links. Let me just stop sharing, and then I'll share different. Let me just. My Zoom today is really messed up. I don't know why. Because now I'm trying to share something and I can't see the place to share it.
Okay, in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box, or you can drop them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and ask your question. I am also dropping the attendance register for today in the chat box, so please do register your attendance. If you're following via YouTube, the attendance register is pinned in the chat box of the YouTube video. Please register your attendance. And like I said, if you have any questions, you can drop the questions in the chat box, and you can as well raise your hand and ask your question. The attendance is already shared in the chat box. Do fill your attendance. If you have any questions, you can ask, but it's very important that you should begin incorporating data journalism into your work, especially if you are somebody who is in the print media, or if you're somebody who is into digital media, where you publish your articles on the website. It's very important that you start looking at different aspects of data and how you can best incorporate these aspects that have been shared into your work. You know, there are a lot of data stories, so you can draw inspiration from the examples, like the examples that he's going to share shortly. That should be very helpful to you. And then you can also go to 2-on-1 check. When you go to 2-on-1 check, for example, there is a place that is basically dedicated to data journalism stories, and then that should be very helpful and can give you some sort of heads up into how you can better improve your data journalism work. So for example, when you go to the 2-on-1 check website, if you don't know the 2-on-1 check website, let me just share the link to the website in the chat box here. Yeah, so that is the website, and I have shared my screen. You should be able to see it here. So when you come to to decent data stories. I will again share this stuff in the chat box. We have a couple of articles that we worked on in the past, giving insights into different aspects. So for instance, this is a data story in which we did a comprehensive analysis of performance by gender, states, and schools in the recently released South Sudan Certificate of Secondary School Examination. And then here we looked at the exchange rate of the South Sudanese pounds against the United States dollars in the past few years. Here we looked at internet data rates in East Africa and which country has the most expensive data rates. Here we looked at analysis of the results from the South Sudan Population Survey. And then here we looked at abductees, jungle. We looked at the number of pupils registered for the Certificate of Primary Education exams. And then here we looked at the digital divide, like why there are very few the data about then young men being circumcised in Bor. So there were about 9 rounds of circumcision. So we looked at how many people were circumcised in each round. And then here we looked at data on persons with disability in Eastern Equatoria State. And then here we looked at South Sudan's debt to gross domestic product ratio. And here we looked at the database of floods. Here we looked at the number of students registered for certificate of secondary exams. Here we looked at women in Western Equatoria State government, the women representation. Here we looked at the South Sudan returnee figures for 2021-2022 for South Sudan. So, and then when we continue to look at what we have here, so you will see that we also have other. I think there's a problem with the pagination. I think it's good that I have noticed this. This is something that I will discuss, but then it's loading. So for instance, let's say if we look at this latest one, oh, it's still loading. So it should be here shortly if the network is done. I don't know if you have any questions. Like I said, you can put the questions in the chat box. And just a reminder, the attendance register has been shared. So please do register your attendance for this session. It's very, very important so that we don't receive any complaints as we move towards the end of this training session, because you will not get a certificate if you have not attended 3/4 of the training session. So there are about 20 training sessions, so you must have attended 3 out of 4. So you can do calculations. 3 out of 4 is 15. So you must have attended at least 15 sessions for you to get a certificate from this training session. So it's very, very important. And so sometimes much as you are here, but then you don't register, we cannot believe that you are here, yeah? So the only way for us to do that is to be able to, for you to register your attendance. And then we give a lot of options. So also the attendance is in the, we always leave it in the comment section of the YouTube recording of each session. So you should have this opportunity to see that. In case you miss the session, you can later on go to the YouTube recording of the same session, and then you find the attendance in the comment section, and then you register your attendance. And it's very important for you especially, and to see that we are all on the same page, especially as we look forward to wrapping up this session next week. I think next week will mark the end of this training. It's been a long journey for all of us, and of course, thank you so much for coming this far. And then, yeah, any questions so far? Any questions as I wait for this page to load? It's not even loading. I don't know why. So let me just refresh and see what exactly is the problem. Okay. Next. Yeah, so there's a pagination issue with this page on this website. So this is something that I should tell the web developer. Yeah. So I was saying that, for instance, if we look at this story, for example, this is an example of a data story. So we look at, for instance, this is the analysis for the number of students that were first registered in a BA in Jongole, in Lex, in Unity, in Pibor, and in different parts, in Reng, in Western Equatoria, in Central Equatoria, Western Barakazal, and so on and so on. And we look at the students by state, the students by state and per that, for instance, these are students that sat. So because there's difference between the number of students who sat and the number of students who registered. For instance, the number of students who registered in PBOR were 42, and the number of students that sat were 38. In a BA, 258 registered, but 255 sat. So this was during the release. And then you come here again, you look at what is the performance index in terms of percentages. What are the top performing schools and how many candidates pass in each school? You see? So this is it. So this is what we mean by writing data. So somebody can just easily interpret this, looking at this and see, oh, someone can just see this and say, male, they shut up, female, this, oh. So it's crazy. And they can come up with that. So Steve, you are not yet sharing your screen. Are you still facing challenges?
I'm having a challenge on my laptop. So it's becoming a real challenge for me now.
So just send me the links. Send me the links to the stories in the chat box.
They are in the presentation. They are in the presentation.
Yeah, just copy and paste through. I have closed my presentation. I have closed the presentation from my end. So just copy and paste it, and then I should be able to open it. Yeah, so this is what it means to work around data. Yeah. Have you all been able to register your attendance, and are there any questions so far? You can raise your hand or you can type your question in the chat box. Yeah. Have you put the links in the chat box? Okay, I'm still expecting that. Okay, I see Gwen is saying he's okay. And then also another thing is the assignments. The feedback from the assignments is very, very low. You should make sure that you are able to accomplish your assignments. These are very important because assignments very often reinforce learning. You should be able to walk through the practical aspects of some of those things that were in the assignment. Now you have 3 assignments. The first assignment is to report incidences of misinformation and hate speech online. You have been given the form. You go to the Google Classroom, and you go to the assignment sections, you will get it there. The second assignment is for you to be able to create a Wikipedia account and then add information on your user page. And then after that, you should be able to do what? You should be good to go. So if you haven't created your Wikipedia account, make sure that you're able to. You should do that. I see a couple of you who have done an excellent job in being able to sort of create their Wikipedia accounts. I can show you examples of some of these people. I see, yeah. So one username is here, yeah. So this is what I mean by saying you should make sure that your username is there. You see, so this is somebody called Dolrex. Like I said, don't use your real name. Instead, you use a nickname or just a mix of letters and numbers. You see, this is me, Dolrek. I am a broadcast journalist, media trainer, and team leader and photographer. I am glad to have joined Wikipedia. As a content creator, I love reading, writing, and video into social news. I'm looking forward to improving Wikipedia content. Thank you. Yeah, you see, so something like this, and then you can start contributing. Like I said in the beginning, just do small edits to articles that you like. And I was saying that all of us should work to improve the article on the elections and stuff like that, and then at the end see how we can do that. So this is the other assignment. So it's very important. And then I see another username that was submitted is one. Let me see. So this one is Daolin. I said that they should be able to create a user page. Yeah, they should be able to create a page. Now there's no page like that, so they should be able to put in description. And then we look at
Bida,
another Wikipedia. Yes.
I have
Are
shared
you able to share your screen now?
I've shared with you the links for the data stories. The two examples that I want us to look at.
Let me just
okay.
Okay, let me just do that. Yes, and I see another Wikipedia account is Andrew and Sons. Yeah, he has put the user details Eastern Park. I think there's no problem with that. So you should just begin doing small edits. Very important. So that is the third assignment. So all of you must have completed these assignments before we send you your certificate. Your certificates will be e-certificates. We wouldn't print the certificates. We'll send you the certificates as PDFs, and then you print. If you will print it from your ends. Yeah. So these are the examples of the data stories that Steve wants to look at. So this is an article by the Premium Times. This is an article by the Premium Times. Yes, Steve. Let me hope you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it. So what I want us to do is just do a comparison on the same topic, but two different ways that they have been done, like how the reporting has been done. So the subject that we are looking at is the Nigerian elections. So what I want us to highlight are two things: how a media house in that country was able to report it, and how they were able to make a publishing. And then we are going to look at how a different organization from a different country was able to do the reporting. So I want us to try and identify some patterns. So I want us to look at the length of the articles. We're just going to highlight this one and then the next one, so that we can be able to do the comparisons. So we are going to look at the length, the type of content they have shared, the graphics they have used to be able to tell the story, so that we can be able to understand how you can be able, some of the ways that you can be able to really just, some of the ways that you can be able to report on a particular story, so that we see the differences. So the first part we are going to look at is on the one that by Premium Times. So here we have the headline. Here it says the dynamics that make Nigeria's 2023 presidential election consequential. Then they have a subheading there. Bola Tinubu defeated 17 other candidates to win Nigeria's 2023 presidential election. And then they give a background. So they do. Don't want us to focus on the text, but let's just look at the structure of how it has been done. So Bida, you can scroll a little bit down. So we have the headline, the introduction, the background. Then we have the first infographic that says hashtag Nigeria decides 2023, total votes polled. Bida, you can move a little bit down. The first infographic we have is the total number of voters that the total number of votes polled by presidential candidates. So what it's highlighting is, of course, they are not highlighting all the candidates. They're just highlighting the best four for APC, Labour Party, then New Nigeria People's Party, and then PDP. And then they have, so you see how they have done the reporting is, one, how they have done the infographic is each of them is highlighting. In fact, my Zoom has finally decided to work. Let me just share it here. Bidaya, just enable me to share the screen. Bidaya, are you there? Hello? Bidaya, enable me to share my screen. No, let's work with that. Seems like I'm not able to share my screen. Bidaya, I'm trying to share my screen so I can move a bit faster.
Okay, is there a link for assignments? Link so that to be dropped in?
Hello? Bidaya, can you hear me? Hello? So I think we can just continue with that for now. Okay. We got it now. So the first infographic that they have shared is the total number of votes that have been cast. So you see they have highlighted just the top four candidates. So you see, because at the beginning they said initially 17 candidates, but that's also one of the principles of doing graphs. Do not have too much clutter that is unnecessary. So the bottom 13, they have not been included in that first initial graph. And then they give a context that this is the lowest percentage of total votes. They give a line chart of the percentage of total votes won by Nigeria's president-elects. So you see that it's quite low compared to other previous elections, whereby there was a high of 68, 55, 62, 61, 56, 53.9. And then in this particular 2023 election, there were 37. So you see now what they are doing is they are just building up the data story that they are doing. So they start with the introduction, the number of votes cast, comparison, to provide a context. Remember, we said that you need to provide a context for the data story. And then lowest total number of votes. And then Nigeria's presidential election results. They give the total number of votes won by the candidates who won the election. So you see that they give a context from 1999 to 2023. And then they move downwards again. Presidential election results in Nigeria's fourth republic. So from the time of 1999 to 2023, how each presidential winner has been able to, how each presidential winner was able to get the number of votes that gave them the seat. And then the number of states won. So you see, now really what they are trying to show is the unpopularity of how the president is unpopular compared to how other previous presidents were elected were popular. So elections, how Nigeria's president elects one poll since 1999. So number of states won, and then the percentage of total number of votes. Then the lowest in 25% threshold, continued trends of low voter turnout. They also provide that context. So voter turnout in Nigeria's election in 1999 to 2023. So you see how they are able to provide a context really of how then that is the end of the article. So how they were able to provide really a context of how many states he won, how many people voted for him, what was the percentage, what was the context, was there a higher or low voter turnout? So really what they were able to do is encompass all information that is needed for this particular data story. And then when we compare it to how a different country was reporting on a different organization, you find that Al Jazeera just reported on it, yes, but did not provide as much detail. And it's the exact same data story we are looking at. But Al Jazeera did not provide as much detail as Premium Times provided. So they just provide the headline, Nigeria presidential election results 2023 by the numbers. Former Lagos Governor Bola Tinubu has been declared the winner. And then we map the state-by-state results below. And they provide, of course, the background context. Then Nigeria is the presidential results. They actually just also gave the top 4. And then they did the state-by-state results. So which party or which presidential candidate won which state. And then they provided a context of who the president-elect was, now the current president. So Bola Tinubu, 70, All Progressive Party. In the timeline of his political career, he was a senator, 92-93, governor of Lagos, 99-07. And then his policy is focused on job creation, industrial revolution, and tackling insecurity. Then they provide the context, and then the ideological barometer, which was not provided by the other media outlet. So in parts of Africa, personality-driven politics highlight patronage and culture, and patronage culture is still dominant. So ideology, politics is not as entrenched on the continent as it was under military regimes, and then they provide an infographic on that. Nigeria elections 2023, ideology barometer. Then for the economic, culturally, then they just give the top 4. So you see how one data story can be able to, one individual story or one individual headline can be able to provide for us different kind of data stories that we can really be able to make, depending on the kind of how much information you have on that particular topic. Because you see now the one by Premium Times, Nigeria, has much more context. So it has the voter turnout, election polls, stuff like that. But then the one by Al Jazeera is reporting on the exact same thing. Did not have as much detail, but has also different things included in terms of ideology parameter. And then also the background of the president-elect. So that just gives us an example of how we can be able to really highlight the kind of data story that can be able to pick from one particular headline and then deviate through different channels and communicate to your audience in a way that they can be able to understand. But then something that we have noted from both of them is, one, each of them had a very clear headline and then a sub-headline. They also use a lot of use of infographics to pass the information. So you see for Al Jazeera, they have them off for the lecture, they have a bar chart for the results. They have a state-by-state results display. They have an infographic on the president, and then they have some other things like the parameter. And then the one by the Premium Times, we have the bar chart that also includes the winner and then the number of votes. We have a line chart. We have another bar graph with different colors. Then we have an infographic. So it just shows the kind of things that we can be able to really explore as we do our data studies. the kind of visualizations that we can be able to use as we look through to communicate to the target audience that we want to achieve, to look at. Then the last example I want us to look at is on last example I want us to look at is for the gender. Just share my screen in a moment. Okay, good. There we go. So this is a story done by the World Economic Forum on the global gender gap. So it's a whole story in and of itself. But what we are going to look at is just how they were able to use data to be able to do the reporting. So we have different kind of things in this report. So we have reports, we have home, key findings, infographics, economic provides, user guide, and then the field report. I'm just going to first of all have a look at the infographics, the things that they were using to be able to display the kind of gender, the gender gap and the closing of that gap. So we have a kind of percentage of the bar graph. So what we have is a stacked bar chart. So both of them on top, then showing how much has been done. 68.4%. The gender gap is back to 2019 levels, but the year of parity remains the same. So this gray part, you see that this is the part that's remaining to be achieved. And then we have another visualization which has quite a lot of, it's kind of a table which has quite a lot of information. We have a global top 10, global gender gap index in 23. Then the rank, the country, the regional rank, the gender gap closed, then the gender gap score, then the score changed compared to 2021. So we see that many countries have the gender score having an upward change, but you find that countries like Sweden, Namibia, and Belgium have a negative change to their score. So that infographic is able to really tell us a lot of things just by that one infographic. You can imagine the number of paragraphs you would have used to be able to use and to be able to communicate the same kind of information. So you see that we have the country, its global rank, then the rank by each region, and then the gender gap close percentage, the score, then the score change. So all that information is being able to use, is being able to display just by using one particular infographic. And then we also have another infographic that's quite interesting that gives us this current pace. What are the regions? When are the regions like to close the gender gap? So some are close, some are not very close. So Latin America 2076, country East Asia and the Pacific 2212. That's like 200 some years from now. So this is also able to give us the number, the kind of information that we really need in a way that is appealing to the eye, in a way that is easy to understand, in a way that really communicates the intensity of the message. Because you see the name and then the number of years it takes, and then which year will that be on the calendar. And then the drop to the top is what's in STEM. So representation of women across the seniority levels in STEM versus non-STEM. So they give us 2 line charts comparing from entry to C-suite, which is the top level in the organization. So you find that it's much more difficult for representation to occur in terms of gender gaps at the highest levels compared to the bottom levels. So that really that just gives us an infographic of an explanation, not really an infographic, but that just uses data journalism to be able to really communicate a message in a way that is easy to understand, that also captures the amount of information that is expected by the audience. So really, those are some of the ways that we can be able to use data journalism in those two specific organizations. And I see our time is almost up, so maybe we can just take a few questions, then we can be able to wrap it up. Let me just share this. Just share this on the group, on the chats, so people can be able to explore it. So any questions?
Okay, so it looks like there are no questions, and also our time is up. Thank you so much, Steve, for the session. We wish everyone the best of their evening. Please and please, I have shared the list for the data reimbursement sheet in the WhatsApp group. So you check whether we have included your correction number and whether we have included the right payment option for you. Check in the WhatsApp group, download the PDF, make any comments before we finalize.